Hi friends, Mindy here. I have a different kind of video today. I am going to be taking part in this challenge. It's called Dephemerember, and it is hosted by Barbara at 49 Dragonflies and Luise. They're doing this in collaboration, and there's a prompt list where for every day there's 2 items. And I don't know that I'm going to be doing this every single day, but basically you're just using what you have to make some ephemera for your junk journals or projects or whatever. And so I thought it would be really fun to kind of join in. I'm a few days late, obviously, getting started, but I don't know that I'll be doing every prompt that's on here, or I may, take this project into January. I don't have time right now to do another like daily project with everything else that I have going on. But for today, I want to get going on this first prompt because I'm really actually excited to do this one. It's the prompt list is available. You can either follow 49 Dragonflies or Luise. They both have the prompt list available if you want to play along, and there's a hashtag and everything, so be sure to get all of that information, but I will link their channels below. But the first prompt for December is ribbon and playing cards. And so I have a bunch of old cards that I've just had forever from, decks of cards that, they get lost or whatever through the years. And so I have just saved those for this kind of purpose, for mixed media work and collaging and that kind of thing. And so what you see me doing here is just kind of adding a base coat to get ready to give these playing cards some interest. So the first thing that I'm adding here is some book text from an old book, and I'm using matte medium. You want something that has got a little bit of tooth with it because these playing cards obviously are glossy. So you can either kind of, sand them down before you start, or you can, I'm just using matte medium and everything is holding down okay. So the first thing that I applied was the book text, and then I applied some tea bag, and then I went in with a paper doily that had some distress stain on it, and then now I'm going in with some brown paper bag, and then I'm going to go in with some music paper. And these are all just like scraps and stuff that I have just sitting on my desk from other projects, from a junk journal that I created and stuff like that. And so I'm just using that to collage all of these elements just to give this some interesting texture and things. And then I have this other paper. This is actually book text from another project that I just did. And I didn't want to go to waste because it's on vintage paper and stuff. And so I'm just adding little pieces of it, and just adds a little bit of a subtle color. And then the next thing I'm going to do is take some gesso. I'm using Dina Wakley gesso, but any gesso would work. And I'm watering it down and just kind of creating a wash over everything, just to kind of pull everything together and kind of mute everything down a little bit so that I can work on it. A lot of junk journals and stuff that you'll see is, there's a lot of neutral colors and browns and like vintage kind of look, but I also like junk journals and stuff that have a lot of color. So you could definitely leave these basically right here as they are, and they would be a good backdrop for anything in kind of a vintage junk journal. But I'm going to take this a little bit further. So after I made sure that those were good and dry, I'm going to add some modeling paste, and I'm using a couple different Tim Holtz stencils. This one is called Speckles, and I have some light modeling paste, and it's pretty dry actually, but it'll still work for this project. I just been applying a really, really thin coat pretty randomly across a few of these cards, and then I'm going to take another one that is called Burlap, I believe, and do the other 3 cards in this other with this other stencil. And so one of the things that at one point I thought I would kind of leave the fact that you could see that they're playing cards, but when I move on to this next step, it kind of, you kind of lose that, but that's okay. You can kind of see all the layers here. And again, this would have been a good place to just leave these. I actually really like how they turned out. They look really beautiful, but in my mind, I had wanted to take these a step further and use some acrylic inks on them. And so, but if you're doing kind of a vintage or more neutral theme, this would have been a good place to leave this. But what I'm pulling out here, this is Moon Violet. This is a Daler Rowney acrylic ink. This one is a pearlescent one. And so I just applied this across the top with they come with little droppers. So I applied that across the top, and then I'm just using some water. That's what's in that blue bottle. And I'm just trying to get the ink to move down. I have this little puffer tool from Tim Holtz, and just trying to get the ink to move around, because it will, depending on the texture that's underneath it, it will react differently. So where the texture paste is, it's going to kind of pool and get darker, and the different types of paper and things that are under that collage, they all hold ink and color just a little bit differently. So what you'll see me here, I'm doing just kind of a mix of different colors. And so purple is my favorite color, so it's kind of my go-to when I'm trying a new thing. It's just a comfort level, I guess, color palette for me is some pinks and some purples and some blues. So I'm using Moon Violet, and then I have a Liquitex one, which is that blue color, and that's cerulean blue hue. And I'm just mixing those together. And now I decided I'm going to try this other one. This is also a Liquitex color in, I think it's cyanine green is the name of it. I probably said that wrong. But anyway, it's like a blue shade, bluish green. And so I'm just mixing that with that cerulean blue hue. That cerulean blue is really, really bright, and it kind of is overpowering. So you'll see me, I'm just spraying some water on, and then I'll take my paper towel and kind of dab some of it off, and then add some of the other, the phthalocyanine green back, and then, you know, just kind of working with it to just kind of get the shades. And I'm working from both ends of the card, trying to get it to run down toward the middle, using some water to get it to spray and kind of run down in between all of the textures of the texture paste and stuff. And so I'm just going to do that with basically all these cards, but in kind of different color palettes. So this one, I sprayed some water on it first to see if it would help, and it does. You can see how this one just wicked out. This is quinacridone magenta this is also a Liquitex ink. And that same cerulean blue. And then I was hoping that these would mix a little bit better into kind of with a purple shade in there. It did do some, but not as much as I was kind of expecting. So I'm just going to kind of force that again, just adding some water, dabbing things off if it gets a little bit too much. And then I decided to come in here with some silver. This is actually an ink, an Amsterdam ink. So I added that in a few places, and then I'm just going to come in there with the little puffy tool and try and get that to spray around, kind of in the same way that you would do alcohol ink, except this is just acrylic ink. So it still like sprays out in between all of the different pieces. And this card I actually just took over to I have a little palette on the side that I put some ink on earlier, and so I just picked up some of that ink just so that it didn't go to waste in those two blue and green colors. And I just picked that up, and then I added a little bit more just to make it a little bit more intense. And then I'm going to come in with this silver, and I accidentally put a whole lot on this one section, and so I had to kind of spray it out. But in the end, it looks really, really cool. I really like how it looked, even though that was kind of a bit of a happy accident. It just, there was more in the dropper than I realized when I went and squeezed it out. So now I'm going to go into some color palettes that are a little bit out of my comfort zone. I like to do that just to challenge myself a little bit. So I'm taking this yellow medium azo, which is a yellow color, and that magenta, and I'm using those on here. And I got a little bit too much of that magenta color, so I went ahead and just sprayed everything down. You can see it's really intense. And then I just took a book page, and I'm kind of mopping up that ink. So whenever I'm working in mixed media kind of this way, I don't like for things in inks and stuff to go to waste. So I will, blot them up with other papers or other kinds of things. And even the drop paper that I'm working on will probably end up in some kind of collage fodder at some point. But I really like how this one turned out. It made the texture paste really intense, but it kind of lifted up off of the background, which was really kind of cool. So I put that one to the side because I was pretty happy with that one. And then I went back in with that green shade and the yellow medium azo color. and it started turning to like almost a lime color, which was okay, but I decided I wanted to add in some of that cerulean blue hue also. And so this card I'm going to work with just a little bit more to really kind of get these colors to blend just a little bit more and seem a little bit more cohesive. And you can see I have that music paper off there to the side. Again, that was just me mopping up some of that ink that I had on that palette over there. I had some palette paper that had some of that ink, and I just wanted to mop all of that up. So these are what my cards look like when they are finished with the acrylic ink. It doesn't take too long to dry, so I can move on to this next step. I wasn't really sure how this part was going to turn out because I had so much texture on these already from the texture paste, but what I have done is I have some Art Basics Heavy Gesso in black over here on my palette, and I am using another one of the Tim Holtz stencils. This one is just got some numbers on it. I don't remember if it has an actual name, but and just a cheap makeup sponge, and I'm just dabbing that paint through this stencil in a few places on these cards. And the trick with when you're working with stencils especially is like working with a heavier body paint just really helps, and also making sure that you just don't have a lot of paint on your stencil or on your sponge. So like I would dip into the paint and then kind of dab it off so that there's very little on the actual makeup sponge when you're dabbing it through the stencil. And then I went through with a fan brush and I watered down that black paint, and I'm just adding some splatters on each of these cards and all over my desk and everywhere. And then I went back in here. I have some gesso and a palette knife, and I'm just put some gesso on the back of the palette knife, and I'm just scraping it very gently across all of the different textures that are on these cards from the texture paste. I wanted to bring back some white into these cards, and just really gently. There's not a whole lot of paint on the palette knife when I'm doing that. And then I went in, watered that same white gesso down, and again using my fan brush here to add some splatters. And then I realized that I wanted to add some border, so I went with my archival ink and a applicator here. I'm just going around the outside, and I had realized that I missed the other step of this prompt list, which was the ribbon. So I pulled out some different ribbon that I had in black and white, and I'm going to use those to finish off these playing cards. So I have this one, and what I'm going to do is just kind of wrap this ribbon around to the back, and I'm just going to staple it along the edges with my Tim Holtz Tiny Attacher. And I'm doing that because I want to kind of keep this open in case I want to add something to these cards. So these cards are kind of a starting off point. These are not necessarily finished. These will end up in a journal or a junk journal or something down the road, but I don't know if they're going to end up being a pocket or if they're going to end up being a tag or a journaling card, or how I'm going to end up using them. So I want to kind of keep them, I don't want to say unfinished, but just, to the point where I can add to them if I want to in the future, just so that there's not like too much, but also wanted to complete the challenge by having this ribbon on here. So this ribbon is actually a self-adhesive ribbon. I've had it in my stash forever. I wasn't even sure it was still going to stick, but it did. And then I added some to the top of a couple as well. So these are my finished little playing cards here. I'm just going to do a little bit of a close-up. I really love how this one turned out, even though that wasn't my go-to kind of color palette. I really love how that turned out. And this one, you can kind of see that silver in there. It's really, really, really shiny. You can see in the corner, that's where that tea bag actually is. You can still kind of see some of those textures peeking through, which was one of the great things about doing mixed media. That's just one of the reasons that I love them. Like I said, you could have, skipped the intense color part and left them neutral as well. And I may actually go back and make some like that because I really liked how those looked. But anyway, again, if you want to follow along with this challenge, be sure that you're following 49 Dragonflies and Luise Heinzel. They are amazing at art journaling and junk journals, and I've gotten a lot of inspiration from both of them, and I'm excited to be playing along with this challenge. So if you like this video, I would appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. That just helps other people find my channel. And until next time, bye-bye.